Hey, welcome to Anime What Ifs. This is part 18 of What If Naruto Married Temari. Three battered and bandaged figures stood before Tsunade, bracing themselves when Tsunade slammed her palm against the desk. It was a simple C-rank mission. What the hell do you mean mission failed? She yelled incredulously.
Naruto sighed when Shikamaru and Tenten both looked at him pleadingly.
Unsealing a very large scroll, Naruto tossed it on Tsunade's desk with a thud. Wasn't a C-rank, Bachan, he said dryly. Suna classified their part in it as S-rank, and I would tend to agree.
Tsunade steepled her fingers in front of her face and narrowed her eyes.
Explain, she demanded.
We weren't paid for anything other than retrieving a lost pet. Naruto exchanged looks with Shikamaru and Tenten again, then shrugged.
Alright, I'm not even going to try to explain everything, that's what the report is for,
he said, pointing at the scroll laying near Tsunade.
I can hit the highlights, I guess.
Shifting nervously under Tsunade's glare, he scratched his head as he thought about where he could start. Might as well start where our team came in, he half muttered. Raising his voice, he began to explain. So, we found the stupid two-brat ..
Ferret, Naruto.
Tenten corrected him, only to get a glare. As I was saying, we had the stupid ferret and then got attacked by some guy wearing this odd metal armor. So we were winning pretty easily against him and his backup squad when someone, he turned to glare at a nervously grinning Tenten,
decided to blow me off a cliff. With my own explosive tags. I said I was sorry. Naruto continued to glare at her. And yet, I don't find myself caring because you blew me off a cliff. Seeing Tsunade beginning to lose her cool, Shikamaru took over for Naruto. We got separated, Hokage-sama, and we started to search for Naruto, but we were interrupted by what we thought was an earthquake. Turns out it was some sort of giant moving metal fortress. Tsunade quirked an eyebrow. You can't be serious. Tenten spoke up. Completely, Tsunade-sama.
We infiltrated it and overheard two women wearing that strange metal armor talking about something called the Jello Stone. Tenten's eyes turned bleak for her next statement.
There were kids, Tsunade-sama.
They stuffed them into these pod things and drained them to power their war machines.
We couldn't save any of them, so we blew the entire fortress up.
From what it sounds like so far, that seems like the logical decision,
Tsunade said gravely. Looking at Naruto especially, she handed out some advice. You'll never be able to save everyone. Sometimes you must simply make the hard choice.
So, how exactly did you blow it up, since Nara here said it was a metal fortress? When Naruto and Shikamaru both turned and glared at her, Tenten shifted and tried to look innocent.
Well, it's possible I may have possibly acquired some of Naruto's modified tags and used them.
The boom was quite satisfying. Faced with the truly terrifying expression of bliss on Tenten's face, Naruto and Shikamaru edged closer together and further from the somewhat deranged girl.
So, anyway, Bachan, I woke up bandaged next to the guy we were fighting. Turns out we were found by the client looking for the ferret and they patched us up.
The clan traveled in this caravan and the clan head Kahiko told me about how they used to have a country but it was destroyed. Then he tells me that the stupid two-brat is actually older than he is and that it had been around since the country was destroyed.
Naruto paused at the look of skepticism on Tsunade's face.
Yeah, that's what I thought, till I found out the stupid thing is immortal. I watched it get cut in half then regenerate, Bachan.
After that, age was just a number.
So, anyway, the guy we fought, his name was Temujin and he got a little aggressive with me about my strange power. At first, I didn't have a clue what he meant, but turns out he had no idea what chakra was.
Shikamaru and Tenten both nodded before Tenten spoke up in support. It's true, Tsunade-sama, they'd never even heard of chakra.
Those machines I mentioned earlier seem to drain the kids of chakra, but it doesn't seem anyone actually understood how it worked. They could do stuff like our jutsu, but they used the stones for the power to do so. Naruto frowned at the interruption even if he was sort of glad for the support.
So, you want to tell this, or can I continue?
He asked Tenten, a tad sarcastic, getting a slight blush of embarrassment from the girl.
Let's see, where was I? Oh, yeah, got it.
So, Temujin runs off and the stupid ferret decided to go with him. Kahiko told me that since the stupid thing wasn't there, the mission was still ongoing. I started to argue with him until I realized that having been unconscious, I never had him sign the mission scroll.
Yes, Tsunade said with a slight grin at his embarrassment. Typically, you would want to get the scroll signed straight away, but I suppose under the circumstances I can let that slide. Thanks, Bachan.
Naruto said, rolling his eyes. Your support means the world to me. Tsunade chuckled and motioned for him to continue his report. I followed Temujin and he led me to that metal structure Tenten and Shikamaru were talking about earlier. As far as I can figure out, when I was getting dragged inside to help form Utopia, Shikamaru and Tenten were infiltrating. So, I get dragged in by Temujin to meet his master, and he introduces me to this team named Hado. He kept telling me about his wish to spread peace, but I wasn't really buying it cause his attitude reminded me of a Hyuga with 2 sticks crammed up. Well, you get my point. He finished hurriedly when Tenten glared at him. Oops, forgot about her little crush on Niji. Wonder if he got that dye out of his hair yet.
Ah, focus.
Tsunade hid her grin behind her hand. Yes, the image his comment created in her head was amusing, but she could tell that Naruto was getting bored and losing focus. Something to keep in mind with his training, I suppose, she mused. We've been focused on the physical, but if he wants to be Hokage, he's gonna have to learn to deal with boredom in a way other than letting his mind wander.
Yes, I get your point, but I need you to focus, please.
Naruto stiffened slightly as he caught the light rebuke, but relaxed again when he noticed that Tsunade wasn't angry, just warning him. So, I tell the team that I'm not interested when there is an announcement that the ship sent to the Land of Wind was destroyed.
I figured since Suna is our ally, I would go check it out. Naruto stopped and pulled a scroll with the Suna hourglass on it. Reminds me, this is for you, Bachan, and I know what it says and I'm really looking forward to it. Tsunade opened the scroll and skimmed the contents. I see. I can't promise you anything, Naruto. This will have to go to the council. Oh, come on, Bachan. Naruto whined.
You're just trying to embarrass me like the whole Koyuki-Heim marriage proposal thing. I thought Temari-chan was going to murder me right there in the council room.
Tenten perked up hearing Naruto's complaint. I thought the princess liked him more than she ever admitted, but she really sent a marriage proposal? Well, that would certainly explain why Temari looked so pissed. Caused me some really unpleasant flashbacks too.
She surfaced from her thoughts and realized she'd missed some of what Naruto said. So Gaara crushed the one that turned into some sort of gorilla thing and the other one grew bat wings and flew off.
Don't look at me like that, Bachan, it's the truth.
So, we gather up Temujin's noble sacrifices, poor kids, and then we took off in pursuit of the bat chick.
Ugh. Tsunade groaned. Just get to the part where you failed the mission I sent you on. I'm going to have to read all this again anyway. Naruto shrugged. Alright, so we killed the bad guy and learned I can add stuff to my Rasengan. Then, the mine everything was in more or less blows up, not actually Tenten's fault this time. Everything is going fine, the invasion force is leaving. And the stupid 2-brat swims out to the ship headed back to wherever it is they came from. So, basically, we stop an invasion of the elemental nations, stop a madman from creating an army of super soldiers and fail our C-rank mission cause the damn rodent runs off. Tsunade stared blankly at the trio for a moment before she slowly reached down and pulled a desk drawer open. Lifting a sake jar, she took a pull straight from it before she reluctantly placed it back. Closing her eyes, she pinched the bridge of her nose attempting to stave off what looked to be one hell of a headache. Naruto, she said quietly. Can't you ever just do something simple? It was a C rank for Kami's sake. Naruto shrugged. It's probably better that it is me. Some of the stuff I've run into on my 2 officially C-ranked missions would have probably killed most of the other Chunin. Tsunade grunted in agreement. The Gaki had a point even if she didn't really want to admit it. It was hard for her to remember sometimes that if every shinobi was a weapon for the village, Naruto was the trump card. It pained her to think like that. She didn't want to think of him being over his head on missions as a good thing, but he needed the field experience badly. 10-10, Shikamaru, you're dismissed. Naruto, stay. We have some things to discuss. As Shikamaru and 10-10 left, Naruto walked over and sank into one of the chairs facing Tsunade's desk with a groan. Anything she felt the need to discuss before he even had time to go home after reporting and probably wasn't going to be something he was going to like. Tsunade studied the Naruto carefully over her steepled fingers before she began to speak. Naruto, while you were gone, I ran some tests on Ino after what happened in the forest during your fight with the Sannin. The good news is that Ino is already healed up and is doing well. The bad news is that as far as I can tell, this isn't just a one-time thing. Whatever the Kyuubi did to her while she was in your head is permanent. So what does that mean? Naruto asked in a subdued voice filled with guilt. As far as I know, anytime you channel the Kyuubi's chakra near Ino, part of it will overflow, for lack of a better description, and channel into Ino. I suspect the same thing happens with Reynard, but you'd have to ask the Inuzuka vets about that. The chakra that streams into Ino doesn't seem to physically harm her like it does you, but her chakra coils won't handle another hit like that. I'll give it to you straight, if you draw on the Kyuubi's chakra near Ino, it will end her career as a kunoichi. Naruto sat back in his chair with a dismayed expression as he digested the information. Bachan, I hate using Kyuubi's power. It feels like a crutch, but being realistic, I am the village Jinchuriki. There are times I may have to use it, so how do we protect Ino? I'm not sure. Tsunade admitted tiredly. Given the nature of the problem, I'll probably have to recall the pervert to find a solution. I'm nowhere near Erosenen's skill with Fuinjutsu, but I do have my mother and father's notes. I can start looking into it. Tsunade gave Naruto a level look. I agree, it won't hurt to have you do some basic research into a possible seal, but I do not want you attempting anything without Jiraiya. Naruto nodded as he stood. Gotcha, Bachan. Trust me, I don't think I'm good enough to do this without him thoroughly checking my work. Tsunade grinned. That's good, Gaki. You're getting stronger very quickly. I don't want you getting a swelled head. Naruto stared blankly at Tsunade. Bachan, have you met my wife? I'm pretty certain that if I get that swelled head, she will be more than happy to pound it out of me. Tsunade began to chuckle and it quickly turned to outright laughter. She doesn't look like your mother, but sometimes she reminds me of Kushina quite a bit. Wiping a tear from her eye, she gave Naruto a pure smile. When I first found out about the marriage, I was really worried, Naruto. It's true I used it to your advantage and got you your inheritance, but deep down I was worried that I was condemning you to being unhappy. Naruto gave her an odd look. Ma, I never had any worries. Tsunade stared at Naruto incredulously, then began howling with laughter. Oh really? She choked out. What about, and I quote here, she's crazy. Naruto flushed and turned his face to the side. Don't know what you're talking about, Bachan. He muttered. Tsunade managed to restore herself to a semblance of calm and shoot him towards the door. Alright, I'm done with you for now, Gaki. I'm sure you're wanting to get home, but don't forget that tonight is the weekly council meeting. Crap. Naruto muttered under his breath as he left the office. Maybe I should have listened to Shikamaru about stopping over and getting back tomorrow. Naruto felt a shiver travel down his spine as he approached his front door. For some reason, he wasn't quite as glad to be back as he'd just been. Reaching for the doorknob, he nearly screeched when Reynard spoke up from right behind him. Welcome home, Naruto-sama. The fox said, his body language screaming his amusement. Kami, Reynard. Naruto half yelled. How the hell do you keep doing that? Satisfaction joined amusement in Reynard's body language as he replied. Do what, Naruto-sama? I was merely welcoming you home. Muttering under his breath about smartass Kitsune, Naruto knelt and ruffled Reynard's fur. How you feeling, buddy? Reynard cocked his head curiously, then realized what he was being asked. Ah, you refer to when I channeled Kyubi-sama's chakra. I have fully recovered, though it was not pleasant. Naruto ran his hands along Reynard's fur, checking for burn scars. Finding barely a trace, he smiled at Reynard happily. Looks like the Inuzuka did good work, I can barely feel the scars. Reynard replied. Hana-san was very thorough with her healing jutsu. I found her to be admirable, for a human that likes dogs. Speaking of, did any of the kits or younger Kitsune bond with any Inuzuka while I was away? Reynard nodded. One of the kits was bonded to a young Inuzuka female. I must admit I was surprised to see Haru chosen. She is one of the kits that has been unable to perform Kitsune jutsu even if she can control her chakra. Naruto frowned. You're right, that is kinda strange. Maybe the Inuzuka will train her to use their Ninken jutsu instead. Naruto glanced up at the door, then back to Reynard. I have to get going, but are you up for a visit to your doctor tomorrow? Reynard quirked an ear. Naruto-sama, I am fully healed. There is no reason. The fox paused. Right, you want to see how Haru is doing without looking like you mistrust the Inuzuka. Your human interactions are somewhat mystifying, Naruto-sama. Naruto gave Reynard one last ear scratch and stood up, dusting his knees off. Tomorrow morning, Reynard. Reynard inclined his head fractionally. Very well, Naruto-sama. I shall be here. I have a word of warning. Temari-sama has been irritable since you left, you would be wise to use caution. Ah, so that's what that feeling of doom was. Naruto waved over his shoulder to show he'd heard. I suppose I should stop stalling then. See ya in the morning. Opening the door, he saw Temari and Sakura sitting at the kitchen table sipping tea while they glared at him. Resisting his instincts screaming at him to run away, he slipped his sandals off and placed them in the shoe holder near the door. Having bought all the time he was going to get, he confidently strolled into the kitchen. I'm home, Temari-chan, he said, giving his wife a beaming smile. His smile faltered a bit when she merely lifted an eyebrow at him and continued to sip her tea. Crap. She's pissed about something, but I haven't done anything this time. I said goodbye, I sent a couple of messages while I was gone. What the hell is she so pissed about? Turning to Sakura, he completely lost his smile when he saw the familiar fire smoldering at the back of her eyes. Sakura-chan is pissed too? This makes no sense. Crossing his arms defensively, Naruto frowned at the two girls. Alright, as far as I know, I haven't done anything wrong, so if I've done something that pissed the two of you off, let's hear it. Temari placed her teacup back in its saucer with a gentle clink and gave Naruto a thin smile. When we discussed possibly adopting Pinky over there the night before you left, you failed to mention that you hadn't discussed it with her. Imagine my surprise when, after looking over the adoption process in your mother's books, I asked Sakura her opinion only for her to be completely surprised. Naruto sighed and moved behind Temari to massage her shoulders. It was perhaps a somewhat unfair advantage, but he'd learned that Temari had a hard time maintaining her anger when his fingers worked their magic on her tense muscles. I'm sorry, Temari-chan, he said softly. I had planned on talking it over with you more before I asked her. I wasn't expecting you to approach her on your own. Temari groaned as his hands turned her brain to mush. I felt somewhat worthless lately, being constrained from doing most physical activity. She admitted quietly. I wanted to do something to show that I was taking my responsibilities seriously. Naruto chuckled and kissed the crown of her head softly. You don't have to worry about that, Temari-chan. I could never imagine you being worthless.
Continuing his massage, he lightly nuzzled her hair.
Forgive me?
Reaching up, she lay her hand on his cheek and lightly patted it. You've learned too many ways to manage my temper, husband. Yes, you're forgiven, but now you're going to have to deal with Pinky, and don't think I'll let you use this technique on her.
Sakura looked on the scene with a deep jealousy.
Living in the same house, she'd become accustomed to Temari and she'd surprised herself by actually starting to like the other girl. Temari was blunt and straightforward in her dealings, but it was at least a refreshing change from the backstabbing gossip in the village.
Watching Naruto pamper Temari and listening to their conversation, Sakura began feeling extremely bitter and she wasn't exactly sure why. She thought a lot of it had to do with Temari not getting to choose her husband and doing well with it, while the opposite was true for her. Hearing the comment about not getting massaged irritated Sakura even more.
It wasn't like she'd wanted one, even if it did look like Temari was blissing out. It wasn't like Naruto was even interested. Suddenly, Sakura knew what was causing most of the rest of her unease.
He was always chasing me, she thought sadly. Even when no one wanted anything to do with me, he was there asking me on a date.
I said I hated it and hit him, but I really wanted the attention.
Watching Naruto finish up with Temari's shoulder massage with another affectionate kiss to the top of her head, caused her temper to flare over the boiling point. Shinaro! Don't ignore me, I'm sitting right here. Completely unaware of Sakura's train of thought, Naruto wandered over to face her with an easy grin. So, what do you think, Sakura-chan? You want to join Clan Uzumaki?
Sakura pointed her finger at his face and spoke with a voice edged with acid. You told me that in the end, all that mattered is how I felt about myself. I thought it was good advice, and then Temari tells me that you had a shadow clone follow me through town and decided you'd offer me a place in the clan so that they would treat me better.
Naruto opened his mouth to defend himself when Sakura began yelling. I do not need your pity, Naruto.
Seeing the dumbstruck expression on Naruto's face, Sakura made the mistake of slipping into old habits. Cocking her fist back, she struck out to punch Naruto and was given no time to react when he twisted to the side and grabbed her wrist. Reacting on instinct and his recent training, Naruto spun to the side as he grabbed Sakura's wrist. Continuing to move with his momentum, he slid around behind her back and pinned the arm up as he palmed a kunai and slammed her face down into the table. He let out a small sigh of relief when he managed to adjust his trained attack with the kunai to slam into the table rather than the back of Sakura's head. Pressing her arm further up her back to make sure he had her attention, he glared at his former crush.
What the hell was that? He growled. You're a guest in my home, Sakura, and you take a chakra-enhanced swing at me for no good reason? Sakura stared at the kunai quivering in the table with absolute shock.
She'd barely seen him move, and Naruto, of all people, had almost killed her. She was understandably proud of her medical training. Even after missing almost a month of classes, she had clawed her way back to the top of the class. The kunai that almost bisected her head reminded her that, for all the time she'd spent studying to heal, Naruto had spent that same time and more learning to kill.
It was a very sobering realization. I'm sorry. She gasped. I was so angry about everything I just acted.
Naruto released her and pointed to the chair she'd been sitting in.
Sit. He commanded. Rubbing her wrist, Sakura sat, not missing the amused glance Temari was sending her. Naruto stood, hands on his hips as he glared at Sakura. Alright, time to clear the air here. Yes, part of the reason I wanted to invite you to join Clan Uzumaki was as a jab straight in the eye for the civilians in the village. Leaning forward till he was right in her face, he lowered his voice. Do you think I'm so shallow that I would allow someone in my clan for only such a reason? Seeing that he had her undivided attention, Naruto pulled the closest chair and sat down facing Sakura. I have a problem, Sakura-chan, he said pleasantly. At the moment, there are only 2 members of Clan Uzumaki. There is me, of course, and then Temari as well. While it's true that the Uzumaki Vitality bloodline is dominant, do you have any idea how long it would take to rebuild the clan with just us? Sakura shook her head shakily.
She'd never considered the problem from that angle, and she was surprised to hear it from Naruto.
Why me? Sakura asked, bracing herself for the possible resurfacing of his temper.
To her surprise, Naruto clapped his hands together and smiled.
Good, you're thinking now. With the Uzumaki bloodline being a passive dominant, the clan would frequently find promising shinobi and have them marry into the clan.
In addition to the extra stability for shinobi families, the polygamy policy was also to produce enough children that there would always be an available Uzumaki if a talented shinobi was found and willing to join the clan.
Sending an amused glance at Temari, Naruto turned back to Sakura.
Since marriage is out in this case for several reasons, there was another practice.
The clan would sometimes simply adopt a promising shinobi, or in this case kunoichi, with the understanding that their children would marry into the clan. Sakura sat still as she processed all the information Naruto had just hit her with. I have 2 questions, she said slowly. First, what do you mean by passive dominant? And second, why me?
Naruto scratched his head in thought. Well, for the first part, from what I read in my mother's scrolls, the Uzumaki don't have what most would consider to be a Keki Genkai at all.
No mixed elemental attacks or funky eyes. What we do have is increased strength, chakra, and health.
Every blood member of the clan gets this to some degree or another, but it's pretty random. So, it's both passive in not having some sort of active effect but also dominant because all clan members get it. I suspect that probably makes more sense for you than it does for me cause of your medical training. Standing, he began to pace.
As for why you?
You should really have some more confidence, Sakura-chan.
You're very smart and have an instinctual control over your chakra that's pretty amazing.
Even back in the academy you tended to enhance your punches with chakra. He gave her a whimsical smile. You flattened me to the ground on more than one occasion, Sakura-chan.
Got any idea how difficult that actually is?
Temari spoke up from where she was watching the conversation with interest. Much as I hate to admit it, he has a point, Pinky. Your abilities would make a useful addition to the clan, but he also has another reason for the offer. Ignoring the glare Naruto shot her, Temari smiled triumphantly. You may be thinking he still has that crush on you. I'm inclined to agree that at least part of that remains. He is such a stubborn boy, but mostly he views you as something like a sister.
For all of the rationale he came up with, it boils down to, he sees you as family and is willing to make it official. Naruto flushed and turned away from the girls in embarrassment. Damn it, Temari, it was hard enough to think of logical reasons. Did you have to just bluntly tell Sakura-chan that? Sakura stared wide-eyed between Naruto and Temari.
She was suffering from an information overload and didn't realize she was crying until she felt the tears slide along her cheeks. For the first time in a very long time, her tears weren't driven by pain or sadness. The fact that after everything that had ever happened between them, Naruto of all people was willing to welcome her to his family because he wanted to was very warming. As much as she wanted to immediately accept, there were things she didn't know and reality came crashing in as it always does. Wiping her tears away, she spoke up. While I appreciate the offer, I would like to look over some of the scrolls about Uzumaki clan practices before I give you an answer.
Naruto turned back to face Sakura with a teasing grin. That's fine, Sakura-chan. You wouldn't be you if you didn't want to get as much information as you could before making a decision. Creating a clone and sending it off to get the requested material. He walked back to Temari and placed a hand on her shoulder. I want you to think this over carefully before you give us your answer. The clone returned with a small pile of scrolls and Naruto motioned it to place them in front of Sakura.
While you're busy with that, Temari-chan and I need to get ready for a council meeting.
Leaning down, he whispered to Temari.
I ran into your brothers on this last mission and there is some news you should hear before we go. Glancing up, Temari was somewhat alarmed by the amusement dancing in her husband's eyes. It obviously wasn't something bad, but Naruto had a strange sense of humor sometimes, and whatever this was, it amused the hell out of him. With a mental shrug, she stood and linked arms with him as they headed upstairs.
Only one way to find out, I guess. Entering the council chambers, Temari let Naruto lead her to her seat in something of a daze. Gaara was going to be the next Kazekage?
It was like something from a fever dream, but Naruto had assured her he was being completely serious. At first the news had failed to really register, and it was only Naruto's obvious pride in his friend that convinced her that he wasn't playing a joke.
Then the further implications hit home.
Fantastic, I just moved from a Kaima to a Narikai on the shogi board.
1. See Dragon's footnote for explanation.
Sitting, she noticed Naruto was studying her with a worried expression. I'm fine, Naruto, it's just a lot to take in.
Naruto nodded and took his seat as Tsunade called the council to order. Reaching over, he took Temari's hand and gently squeezed.
Yeah, I was sort of shocked when he told me, but I'm proud of him. He really turned things around for himself. Temari's smile was a tad bitter when she whispered back.
Yeah, it's a good thing, but I can't help feeling I should have been there helping him out. I'm not saying he wouldn't have appreciated having you there. Naruto replied.
I will say that there isn't much you could have done to help him. This was his path to make for himself, and he did it well.
Temari nodded, and the two fell silent as the council ground its way through the usual boring procedures.
She could accept that he was right intellectually, but she still felt she'd let her little brother down, and it bothered her.
Finally, we have 2 additional items on today's agenda. Tsunade announced.
First, in approximately a week or so, we will be receiving Kuratsuchi from IWA. Naruto, you weren't here when Iwa's response came, but they agreed to a long-term engagement for her to the Uchiha clan.
Naruto blinked at the news, then looked confused. Bah! I mean Hokage-sama. I thought they wanted a marriage, but you just said long-term engagement. What's the difference?
Tsunade drummed her fingers on her desk as she thought about an appropriate response. She had her suspicions, but airing them in an open council meeting like this would be unwise. Well, unlike with you and Temari, where the marriage happened very quickly, IWA has taken a bit of a different approach. She will be engaged to Sasuke for an indefinite period of time to determine if they are compatible as spouses. She turned a glare on Sasuke to show her displeasure. I suspect it's probably a response to recent actions taken by the Uchiha clan.
Naruto nodded to show he understood. Thank you, I understand, Hokage-sama. I don't have any other questions. Good. Moving on to the next item.
Tsunade has chosen a new Kazekage, and it is a very favorable choice from our standpoint. She threw a quick smile at Naruto. They have chosen Gaara, and he has requested his sister and brother-in-law's presence at his coronation in 2 weeks.
Danzo raised his hand for attention and spoke up. Forgive me, Hokage-sama, but is it wise for Temari-san to be traveling to Suna in her condition? She is carrying the Uzumaki Namake's heirs. It seems unwise to place them in danger. Naruto leaned towards Temari.
Heirs? He asked, confused.
Temari shook her head.
I'll tell you later, but I want to know how he knew that.
Naruto rolled his eyes.
I did tell you he was dangerous.
Didn't you read my father's journal? Temari felt her cheeks color slightly from embarrassment. I didn't get around to it. Things have been busy. Naruto shook his head again with a sigh. Yeah, but you should really set some time aside to read it. It's informative.
Turning back to the ongoing conversation, Naruto noticed the council was fairly evenly split between people wanting to keep Temari in the village for various reasons and those that wanted to let her go. Listening to the byplay, he felt a plan forming that might somewhat satisfy both sides.
Standing, he motioned to Tsunade that he wished to speak.
There have been good arguments both sides, but I have a compromise that I believe will work. It would be unwise to deny Gaara his request to have his sister present when he becomes Kazekage, but there is some truth to the fact that it might be dangerous for Temari to go.
I believe that is substantially what we've said. Sasuke spoke up. Get to the point, Dobe.
Naruto glowered at Sasuke before he schooled his face back into a small grin.
Don't worry, team. He shot back. I'm getting there. What I propose is an escort for Temari and me that would also show Konoha's support of Gaara. Danzo regarded Naruto thoughtfully. An escort is a good idea. He admitted. I have several men I've trained for personal security that could do it. Naruto forced his grin to remain. Yes, I'm sure you do, Danzo-san, but it wouldn't show Tsunageki respect like the team I would like to request. Tsunade spoke next. What team, Naruto? Team 8. We be sending 2 council members, myself and Asuma-sensei, as well as 3 clan heirs. It would be both a show of force and a sign of respect. Danzo traded glances with the other 2 elders and spoke for the group. The elders would agree with this plan with the minor addition of an ANBU escort squad.
Naruto considered Danzo's words.
Obviously, the ANBU squad would have one of his root agents, but his request was reasonable.
If he wanted the council to accept the compromise, he'd have to accept. It would certainly be reasonable to have a larger escort for such a group.
I have no objections to your proposal. Provided your agent doesn't do something I don't like, Naruto finished his sentence in his head.
Seeing the room in agreement, Tsunade called the room to attention again.
Seeing that we have an agreement, I'll assemble a squad for the protective detail.
I'll let you rest for a few days, Naruto, given that you just got back.
Expect to be summoned in a few days to finalize details for the trip.
Getting an irreverent thumbs up from Naruto, Tsunade resisted the urge to roll her eyes. Very well, council dismissed. Walking out the door, Naruto was forced to ask Temari the question burning in his brain.
So, heirs? Temari rolled her eyes at Naruto's one-track mind. Yes, my last checkup confirmed that I'm carrying twins. A boy and a girl.
She was forced to stop when his arm stiffened and she looked over to see Naruto frozen with a ridiculous grin on his face.
Congratulations, fangirl.
Ino commented from behind Temari where she was standing with her team.
I think you broke him.
Temari shook her head sadly. It's a shame, I was thinking about going out for ramen but I guess we can't now. She paused waiting for him to respond, then noticed he hadn't even twitched.
Wow. Choji said, munching on some chips. I didn't think anything could distract him from ramen.
What did you tell him? I just told him Tsunade confirmed that we're having twins.
A boy and a girl.
She was cut off when Ino blumped her with a loud cheer.
That's awesome. Can I help you?
Oh, we so need to go shopping, there are the cutest little baby clothes. Temari stuffed her hand in Ino's face and pried the other blonde off.
Damn it, flower girl, get off. Fine, after the trip to Suna, we can go shopping, but you'd better not go all nuts on me.
Ino stood there fairly quivering in excitement, her joy of shopping flashing in her eyes, and Temari felt the urge to facepalm.
Why are Konoha Shinobi and Kunoichi so strange?
Naruto broke out of his trance and moved over to where Temari seemed to be cowering away from an excited Ino. Deciding it was some sort of girl thing, he ignored it to gently run his hand on Temari's stomach.
Twins,
he said dreamily with a wide smile.
That's really awesome news, Temari-chan. I'm glad you approve. Temari said dryly. If you wouldn't mind, can we go before Flower Girl attacks me again? Oh, hey Ino-chan, good to see you. Temari-chan, why is Ino-chan looking at me like that? It's disturbing. Temari glanced at Ino.
Oh, I promised to go shopping with her after our trip to Suna.
I think she just figured out she can use your clones to carry stuff. At least that's the only reason I can think of her smile being that predatory. Naruto paled and grabbed Temari tightly while concentrating. Just as Ino opened her mouth, the two vanished in a golden flash. Knew, that was rude. Ino pouted. I just wanted to ask him to make a few clones to come along, now I'm going to make him come too.
Turning around, Ino grabbed her ponytail in frustration when she saw her teammates had disappeared. Muttering to herself under her breath, she stalked off to search for them and missed seeing Choji and Shikamaru peering around the corner of the Hokage Tower. Seeing Ino leave, Shikamaru slumped back against the building and stared at the clouds.
How bothersome. Naruto took off and left us to deal with Ino. Why are blondes so troublesome?
Choji opened his mouth to agree, when he was cut off by a sickeningly sweet voice from right next to him.
Troublesome are we? Shikamaru turned his head in horror to see Ino standing next to Choji with a very troublesome look on her face. Ino, how did you get there? We saw you leave.
Ino smiled evilly and formed a sign with her hands both boys were very familiar with.
You forget. I was in Naruto's head and saw how he learned this.
I didn't have the chakra for it before, but after the fight in the forest with the Sannin.
Ino shrugged.
I can't use it like he can, but it's still useful.
Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Shikamaru and Choji looked on with horror as Ino multiplied. 1 Ino was bad enough, 5 Inos was just plain terrifying. How troublesome. Hope you liked this episode. The next one is coming soon.